It's official. It is pretty much the end of Justin Trudeau. Last night was two really big by-elections that took place, and Justin Trudeau, it was, labeled as these are strongholds, equivalent to or just about as equivalent as the Toronto St. Paul, which you remember the hype around that a couple months ago. That was massive. And then just yesterday morning, they announced the Liberal stronghold Conservative MP. They welcomed him into Parliament, and Pierre looked over and gave a thumbs up to Justin Trudeau. And last night, the Liberal candidate actually fled. They left before the votes were all counted because that's how bad it was. So we're going to be taking a look at that. We're also going to be taking a look at some question period highlights from today, but also more importantly, the rise and potential fall of Premier Danielle Smith. I hate to say it, but this is such a tricky situation to be in because she is personally, but not personally, inflicting a re-education program on one of her MPs, and it's getting a lot of traction. And so we're just going to kind of clear through the mud and take a look at exactly what is happening. Because I know there's a lot of people on this channel that are big fans of Danielle Smith, and this is very heartbreaking. So of course, we're going to go through everything. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage everyone to smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. It does really help grow the channel. And without further ado, let's get into the polls. So you got Pierre Poilievre sitting at 219 projected seats, the bottom line 189, top end at 240, and then you have Justin Trudeau at 68. I do think that you're going to start to see those really fall down quite a bit into maybe the lower 60s, even the 50s come the next update. And then Bloc at 40 and NDP Jagmeet Singh. Hold on a second here. I got to zoom in, folks. My eyes aren't working too well. 14. Oh, itty bitty polling number. Hey, look at that. And then 99% likely across the board for winning the most seats and 99% likely for a majority government. So on that end, things are looking quite good. Now we need to look at what's happening with Danielle Smith because it's very interesting, and it's throwing a lot of people into this weird kind of head-turning situation. Like, wait, what is she doing? So let's look at it. So not too long ago, a Smith UCP candidate made a feces comment about correlating feces to transgenderism. Let's just take a look at this. This is from not too like a couple years ago.
Danielle Smith says she will not allow controversial UCP candidate Jennifer Johnson into caucus if her party forms government. This coming less than a week after Smith said she believes in redemption and second chances. Nicole DiDonato now on what that latest decision means.
Danielle Smith says her decision about UCP candidate Jennifer Johnson, who compared transgender students to feces in food, is final.
I've made it very clear that I've made the decision that she will not be sitting with our caucus should she be elected.
Johnson made several homophobic and transphobic comments in September before winning the UCP nomination in Lacombe-Ponoka. Johnson has apologized, saying she's embarrassed she caused hurt. Smith's stance comes 5 days after she told CTV News Johnson could be welcomed back.
I do believe that people have the ability to have second chances. She's got a lot of proving to do.
It strikes me as this is trying to find the sweet spot that will, get over this fairly problematic bump in the election.
Right. So that put Danielle Smith in a very tricky situation. Now, she did actually welcome her back. Let's take a look at this here. Alberta MLA who likened trans youth to feces in food may be welcomed back to UCP, says Premier Smith. And this was just a couple of days, or like a week ago. Geez, time flies by. And so this, got posted on Reddit. But first, the MP had to undergo some sort of trans policy reform, re-education, which is something that Jordan Peterson had to go through, and that got blown out of proportion. So that's actually what we're taking a look at. What we're going to be looking at next is part of this re-education, but it's only coming to light because it's blown out of proportion, it's having catastrophic repercussions. So this is the individual we're taking a look at here, Victoria Buchholz. So Victoria Buchholz, who identifies as she, her, holds a doctorate in history from the University of Calgary with a cognate field in gender theory. Victoria is an LGBTQ plus facilitator and currently teaches at Mount Royal University. She is a transgender's rights activist, entertaining producer, and a drag queen. An avid mountaineer, skier, dog mom, she lives in Calgary, Alberta in the Treaty 7 region. And this website is actually called QEF, Queer Education Foundation. This website is designed for, designated, if I'm not mistaken, towards people that need education on the LGBTQ plus community. And that's what we're taking a look at right now. Now, a couple things to keep in mind as we go through this very, very radical and outrageous clip is that the member on the right here, Victoria Buchholz, that we just went over their profile or her profile on the Queer Education Foundation website, I believe the position is more advantageous towards her from a position of authority. This individual here is part, if I'm not mistaken, of this re-education program for the individual in question, Jennifer. Now, from a teacher's perspective, it's a teacher's job, it's an educator's job to understand fully the context of the situation. Where's this person coming from? What's their background? What have they been exposed to? What's the final objective? If the final objective is for Jennifer Johnson to admit that trans are women, that's a long way to go from comparing feces and food to transgender kids, or whatever the comment that was originally made that landed Jennifer in this position in the first place. A lot of Canadians feel very weird about this, right? If I'm not mistaken, a lot of people on the left say, "Hey, no, you have to accept my identification." And there's weird areas where those self-identifications can change day to day, week to week, month to month, and it can get very confusing. A lot of people on the other side say there are two genders. Then there's a lot of people in the middle that go, "I don't really know and I don't really care. I just don't want this to be imposed on kids." And so that's kind of where we need to get the majority of people is, I don't really know, I don't really care, this doesn't need to be imposed on kids. And then once we can all agree on that, then we can go from there. And so that's what we're taking a look at today, right now, with this clip. And right out the gate, as you can see, it's nowhere near the middle of where the majority of Canadians lie, right? This is freaking nuts.
I'm going to throw it over to Victoria now, and she'll just touch on a little bit more about that.
Hi, Jennifer. I really want to thank you for meeting with us today and taking the time to try to signal that this is more of a priority for you.
Absolutely. Delighted to meet with you all.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Before I would ever say, though, that this was a productive meeting and be counted to the list of contacts that you've reached out to in the queer community, I have to know a few things of where you sit. Will you state on the record right now that trans women are women?
I've never been asked that before.
Will you say that on the record right now?
No, I want to have some time to think on that.
Okay.
That's a pretty normal response. Like, a lot of Canadians feel quite similar to that. You know, it depends socially. Am I around a lot of people that are going to then attack me if I say no, or is it safe to say yes? Or do I just say, I don't really want to answer that? Believe it or not, that's where like a lot of people lie. Now, you may have more concrete opinion, and that's okay. But a lot of Canadians, just by the polls, by the numbers, by the statistics, lie in the middle that they don't really care, but like, hey man, stop with pushing that on minors. And as you can tell by the upcoming response by Victoria, this, educator, that this is not an acceptable answer.
Okay, well, that's me. Have a great day. And I will be speaking out against this meeting because you are clearly not ready to have this. So I'm not going to be added to the list of meetings that you are going to have with people where you say, well, I met this person and this person, because no. You can't say I've had these consultations and use that as justification for you to work your way back into caucus, which is why we know you're really here.
So we have to ask ourselves, a couple of questions. One, what makes this person right here, Victoria Buschholz, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, what makes that person have the qualifications to decide whether someone should or shouldn't be, accredited with this re-education to be allowed back in caucus? This is it seems like a very triggered response to something where the answer was quite neutral. And if you're talking about from an education standpoint, the progression of going from making the comment of comparing it feces and food to transgender minors or whatever the comment was to I don't really want to answer that right now. That is massive progression from an education standpoint. And that right there, the response just goes to show that this meeting was set up for this individual to almost have the bias and the readiness to be triggered. This is almost a setup. It's not good. And anyone who's looking at this from an evaluation standpoint should absolutely take that into consideration. That is a massive look. You shouldn't have to be forced to admit anything. If your answer is simply, I would like more time to think about that, and you just keep saying, I would like more time, then that's your answer. But to push on somebody, that's not acceptable. And, don't add me to your list of people that you've talked to. That just seems wildly inappropriate. And no professional educator, whether it's a university, whether it's a middle school, if you go to college and for some reason you've been maybe bonked on the head and all of a sudden your professor says, hey, what's 5 plus 5? And you go, I don't really know that yet. I'm still working out on this bunk that I got on my head. And then the teacher says, yeah, that's it. You're not really fit for this. Get out, right? You're too dumb, essentially. That's a crazy thing to say from an educator's standpoint.
This only happens. This meeting is only happening because you're on Twitter, in the Twitter sphere, and people are debating whether or not you're going to be led back into caucus, and Premier Smith is debating that. And so you need to do some PR work. And I'm not going to be your Band-Aid. I'm not going to be your pink washing. Unless you can tell me right now that you believe that I, as a trans woman, right now, right here, am a woman, then we don't have a lot to work on here. You want to talk about listening to the community? If you can't start with that basic foundational principle that we are who we say we are in our bones, then I don't think we're on the same page for working forward.
You can say whoever you can identify as whatever you are, but pushing this onto other people when their answer to your views of who you are is simply, I don't want to answer that. It's not respectful. It's not disrespectful. It's quite literally as neutral gets. The only thing more neutral could have been blinking repeatedly. But even then, arguably, that vow of silence and that speechlessness would be considered not neutral. So that was probably the most appropriate answer that somebody could have had to be neutral.
So I'll give you one last chance. Are trans women women? Will you say that on the record right now?
Victoria, we can disagree on things. And
not on that.
still
Not on
be-
my identity. No. Not
And
on
I
that.
can still care about you, even if we disagree.
Wonderful. But I will be speaking out against this meeting 100% if you can't say that right now, because I'm not going to have you add my name to the list of meetings that you've had to show that you're, quote, doing the work, because you're not doing the work. The work is the inner work. You're learning the outer work. You're learning what you're allowed to say in public and what you're not, so you don't get in this situation again, because you got caught saying what you really thought. And you did think that. But you haven't shown that you've changed.
Quite literally, she just showed that she changed by not answering either side of the spectrum. So you can tell that this is somebody who's not qualified to be a re-educator, not qualified from an educator's standpoint to be in that position of authority. This is called power tripping. You see it all the time, unfortunately, in law enforcement. You see cops abusing their power on people that they think might not know the law or understand, or they think that they can get away with it, or maybe there's no cameras. You see it all the time with politicians, and now you're seeing it from people that are in positions of authority as re-educators, and this is what Jordan Peterson had talked about of how crazy this entire idea is. Who are the re-educators? What is their standpoint? How are they being held accountable, right? Are there any repercussions for them? Who deemed these people as the golden standard individuals to be able to accredit or deny a re-education stamp? It's just so radical. Wow.
Because if you can't respect us, then how can I work with you? If you don't believe that I am a woman sitting right here, right now, how on earth are you saying that you're working with me? What work have you done then if you can't start with, yes, Victoria, you are a woman?
Okay, Victoria, I'm going to let you know something right now. When people talk, there's often times where, whether it's I've been in that situation or other people have been in that situation, where you can tell that someone talking is absolutely bullshitting. The story isn't even remotely close to being true. And you just nod and go, okay, yeah. And you have your beliefs and you let them talk, and either it gets called out or it doesn't. But nonetheless, they identify as that story being true, whether they're trying to trick themselves or trick other people, and you just let it happen. Now, if you want to identify a certain way, sure, should literally every person in the world or in Canada be subject to having to admit that? Not saying be disrespected and not call you by your pronouns, but literally not taking a stand and saying, I neither admit nor deny. I don't have an answer for you right now. That is showing massive levels of improvement in terms of this re-education, right? Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this. I think that this was a massive, just shit show, and it's putting Danielle Smith in a super unfortunate position for a couple of factors. One, a lot of people are now going after Danielle Smith, saying, how could you possibly put your candidate, your constituent, in a position of re-education? We thought you stood against that. But now Danielle Smith is going to see this and have to speak on the outcome of this. So there's two options. Danielle Smith could either say, this was rigged, it was unfair, it was clearly a triggered individual that was in this position that used that opportunity to try and make a mockery of Jennifer, or go on the other side and say Jennifer isn't fit for working with the UCP. So now Danielle Smith is in the entire UCP and all of Alberta's political clout and where they stand politically is at risk because of this singular clip. Let me know down in the comments if there's even a possibility of getting out of this on top. I really have no idea, other than Danielle Smith taking a firm stance and saying, look, Jennifer showed clear improvement from the comments she made a couple of years ago that got her in this situation, and Jennifer stayed as neutral as a neutral person could be. And we think that if there ever is a need to continue re-education, which is absolutely absurd to begin with, but nonetheless, if that is something that is a necessity, then I think it should be from somebody who's actually qualified. But again, how do you determine that? What are the factors? What's the bias? Who is that person who's making those qualifications or those determining qualification outcomes? Who are their friends in their social group? Because then you could have friends that are whispering in their ear going, hey, why don't you try and bait Jennifer into saying this? Or why don't you try and get a reaction or trigger? Like all of these things, right? Which shouldn't be factors when you're talking about education. But unfortunately now you are. And this is the weird, wacko world that we're living in. So let me know down in the comments what you guys think. And now we're going to switch over to Justin Trudeau's absolute failures, the by-election here. Let's take a look at this craziness. So Liberal MP flees her own campaign HQ after she comes in third with less than 5% of the votes counted.
We're all trying to figure out why Laura Palestini gave that speech when she gave that speech. You got any insight? What's the vibe and the reaction at the headquarters after that?
Well, David, I could tell you one thing. As much as she was energetic in her speech, she was also energetic in leaving the party. She immediately left as soon as she gave that speech. She did a few steps saying thank you to the volunteers, turned around, went out the door, and of course we followed her. Thought maybe she was just getting some fresh air. No, she got drove away. This doesn't really.
And now we're going to take a look at the actual results from this by-election. So this is crazy. Justin Trudeau is going to have an immense amount of backlash, and that's likely something that's going to be mentioned in the House of Commons later on today.
We have breaking news this morning. In another blow to the Liberals, the party has lost a riding in a by-election, a big riding though. This time it was in Montreal to the Bloc Québécois. Out west, the NDP held on to their Winnipeg riding. After a back-and-forth battle, Bloc candidate Louis-Philippe Sauvé narrowly edged out the Liberals' Laura Palestini in the Montreal riding of Les Salles-Émard-Verdun. It's a stunning loss for the Liberals, who have now lost 2 former strongholds in successive by-elections. And in the Manitoba riding of Elmwood-Transcona, the NDP's Leila Dance garnered just over 48% of the vote to edge out her Conservative rival Colin Reynolds by 4 points. The Liberals' Ian McIntyre finished a distant third at fewer than 5%. And CTV's Rachel Aiello joins me now from Ottawa to talk a little bit more about these by-elections. Rachel, thanks as always for joining us. Take us through the results. Who are the winners overall, and who are the losers?
Yeah, good morning. So clearly a devastating loss this morning for the Liberals. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had already lost in downtown Toronto, and now he's facing a big loss of a Liberal stronghold in downtown Montreal. So all eyes and ears are going to be on Parliament Hill this morning to hear potentially his reaction. Certainly cabinet ministers are going to be asked. This is exactly what the Liberals had hoped didn't happen. It was looking like a 3-way race in Montreal, but ultimately overnight the Bloc came out on top. So that is now also putting the Bloc Québécois in a very interesting position. They were heading into this parliament basically being the new candidates to hold the balance of power. But if they are now looking like they have made inroads in the island of Montreal, their numbers are looking good in Quebec, is there an incentive for them to want an earlier election? So a lot of dynamics are at play, certainly.
So I personally think that now that the Liberals have lost those by-elections, I think that we're in a more advantageous position to actually see an earlier election, because we all know the cost of living is going to be more than what it is right now in a year. The cost of housing, interest rates, they can say it's negative 5%. It doesn't really matter. You go to the grocery store, you pay for your gas, you pay for your home heating, you try and pay for rent, you try and get a mortgage. We all know that expenses are through the roof, and wages have not nearly kept up to a fraction of what the rise in interest rates have been. So it doesn't matter how much they try to reduce inflation right now, the damage has already been done, which begs the question, do the Liberals actually think that in 13 months from now they will be more popular than they are right now? I, again, do not think that that is likely at all. Now, there is the saying that it's only up from here. But as we've seen, that does not actually apply to Justin Trudeau. If that were the case a year ago, after he invited a Nazi to Parliament, he would be more popular now than he was after that incident. But that, again, is not the case. Somehow, Justin Trudeau today is less popular than when he invited a Nazi into Parliament, where Putin said, wow, I can't believe it, right? The whole world was shocked that that actually happened, but somehow Justin Trudeau is not in the position of ever being able to say it's only up from here. Justin Trudeau is in a position of saying, oh no, it got worse. How much worse can it get? And the answer is very much worse if he waits longer. So we're all thinking about maybe the Bloc calls an election, maybe the NDP calls an election. I don't want you to rule out the fact that Justin Trudeau and the Liberals could also be calling an election with all of this data. This is my opinion from looking at polls, from watching the news, from being in the know-how of what is going on. They have way more data to work with, and the data is there to show that the Liberals are becoming increasingly less popular as time goes on. But I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. And next up, we're going to take a look at some of the question period highlights that occurred today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this. Peers up, peers up. Oral questions! Questions orales! Honourable Leader of the Opposition, soon to be next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre.
Canadians in the former Liberal strongholds of Toronto and Montreal have now given their verdict. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Taxes up, costs up, crime's up, time's
up. Let's go!
Isn't it time for Canadians to have a chance to render their verdict right across the country, electing a common-sense Conservative government that will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop
the crime. Let's go! W's for Pierre! Oh, there's no more Liberal strongholds.
Ask members, especially members on the far side,
that's good,
not to take the microphone until they're recognized by the Speaker. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Speaker.
So glad to have the chance to talk about the economy. That is because today we had good news for Canadians. Inflation is back down to where it was before COVID hit. Inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range this whole year. Wages have outpaced inflation for 19 months in a row. But the Conservatives don't want to talk about it. They are so weak and spiteful that for them, good news for Canadians is bad news they want to ignore.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, this incompetent finance minister would tell you that you should celebrate that after prices rising faster than at any time in 40 years, they continue to rise, just not as quickly. I'm sure the people living in tent encampments, or the record-smashing 2 million people lined up at food banks, or the 1 in 4 kids going to school hungry after 9 years of this government will be celebrating. But what we now find out is that it's worse than we thought. According to a document just released, the government's second carbon tax will cost $9 billion in lost GDP. Why won't we have a carbon tax election to decide?
Let's go, Pierre.
The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I think we all know why the Conservatives are so panicked about an election. It's because they can see that the economic news is good.
Are you nuts?
That we are now back to exactly where we were before COVID hit.
What?
The Bank of Canada has lowered interest rates 3 times in a row, and wages have been ahead of inflation for 19 months. That's good news for Canadians. It's bad news for Conservatives.
Yeah, right!
And once again, I apologize. Normally, I would...
Gaslighting, that's exactly what that is.
By saying the Honourable, and I forgot.
Drop some L's for Freeland.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The bad news is we now have 1,800 homeless encampments in Ontario. Shame. 35 in Halifax alone. 2 million Canadians lined up at food banks after 9 years of NDP Liberal government. And now that we learn that on top of the $25 billion annual hit of the first carbon tax to our GDP, the second carbon tax will subtract another $9 billion a year, over $35 billion in lost GDP. That's almost $2,000 per family. Why won't this costly NDP Liberal government allow Canadians to vote on the carbon tax?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Yeah, let's vote on the carbon tax. Mr. Speaker.
So glad to have the chance to talk about housing, because there is more good news Canadians should know about. And that is that we have extended to 30-year
amortization. Bro, that's not good.
I'm home buyers.
People are going to be paying more interest.
Can buy that first home and afford that mortgage. We've extended to 30 years amortizations for all new homes.
You still own nothing and be happy?
Faster. But these weak and spiteful Conservatives cannot celebrate good news for Canadians because it's bad news for their partisan interests.
Wow. Name calling, huh?
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
There you go. They also won a by-election.
The Liberals have let people down again and again, and they are done. It's clear from the results of the election last night. The Liberals are done. Maybe it's because they keep teaming up with the Conservatives to let greedy CEOs continue to rip off Canadians. In fact, inflation numbers show that grocery greed has driven up the food prices more than 21% in the past 3 years. Why did the Liberals team up with the Conservatives to protect greedy CEOs from a price cap on food essentials?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I hope the NDP and indeed all members of this House will set partisanship aside for one moment to congratulate Canadians at the light at the end of the tunnel, at the fact that after an extremely challenging time and its economic aftermath, inflation is back to where it was before COVID first hit. When it comes to taxes, we believe that those who have the most capacity should pay their fair share, and we've acted on that.
Then I have
they got murdered in the polls.
Team up with the Conservatives to let grocery greed drive up the price of food, and that's got to stop.
Yesterday, it became clear that people are finished with the Liberals. It's because they worked with the Conservatives to allow real estate giants hike rents by over 20%. Why do the Liberals keep teaming up with the Conservatives and allowing these giants rip people off? The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
I think anybody listening to Question Period today, or frankly any day, imagines that the Liberals are teaming up with the Conservatives.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very rare W for Freeland and the Liberals. She's got a point. She's got a point.
They are the party
I'll give her that.
of privilege and austerity. We are the party of people.
And you lost us.
We have asked those at the very top to pay their fair share so that we can support Canada and Canadians.
She had us in the first half, lost us in the second half. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the video. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in comments about any of the topics that were covered. And of course, on your way out, I would like to encourage you guys one last time, if you haven't yet already, to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't yet already, and we will see you in the next one. Bye for now.